had to push me to go there with this nurse.
That day must have been about 3-4 ships. Must have been about 5,000-6,000 people. Jammed. I remember it was August. Hot as a pistol. And I'm wearing my long johns and a heavy Irish tweed suit. I'm dying with the heat. So you're not concerned. You don't realize that this is history in the making. You're just you want to get in, get the hell out of there and get off. You understand?
They got off the boat, and then they walked in a parade up those stairs into the building. Many of them came through with all their bedding and their last possessions, that they owned. They looked pretty bad.
These buildings were filled with people who were desperate, whether from hunger or discrimination. They didn't leave where they came from because life was so good for them. It wasn't. Whatever they had here was better. And that's what I feel now. I feel these people all around me, so desperate to cross this little body of water.
A century ago, in the shadow of the Statue of Liberty, one of the world's great public hospitals was built. The hospital was America's first line of defense against contagious disease. It was here that the germs of the world converged. Malaria and typhus from the tropics, cholera from the Mediterranean, hookworm from the rice paddies of Canton, Favis and trachoma from Central and Eastern Europe. The Ellis Island Hospital was massive. 22 buildings crammed onto 2 small islands, man-made from rock and dirt excavated while building New York's subway system. The hospital was where America's conflicting beliefs about immigration collided, at once welcoming and threatening. Those judged healthy enough to work were allowed entry to America. Those thought incurable, insane, or weak were deported.
Let no one believe that landing on the shores is a pleasant experience. It is a hard, harsh fact, surrounded by the grinding machinery of the law, which shifts, picks, and chooses, admitting the fit and excluding the weak and hopeless. Edward Steiner, On the Trail of the Immigrant.
3 short decades after the Ellis Island Hospital opened, it was abandoned, left to ruin. As America after World War I closed its border to all but a favored few, the hospital fell into disuse and decay, and then into emptiness, its medical wards left open only to the salt air of the New York harbor. The story of the great Ellis Island Hospital has gone largely untold, forgotten by all but the generation that lived it.
The medical officer examined us and found out we had measles. And we hadn't the foggiest idea where we were going, or really why we were going. It's a journey that many people took and remembered. Others would like to forget. I wanted to remember.
Between 1880 and 1924, nearly 25 million immigrants left their homelands for America. Half came through Ellis Island. Most were from northern, southern, and eastern Europe. In much smaller numbers, they came from China, Canada, and Mexico. Of the 12 million who came through Ellis Island, tens of thousands of immigrants failed the mandatory and were detained at the hospital. The hospital was commanding in its size. The General Hospital was built first and housed 120 beds. It would grow to 3 times that size. Then the Psychopathic Hospital, with its 50 beds and isolation rooms, was constructed. Last built were the wards of the 450-bed Contagious Disease Hospital, which sprawled across 2 of the islands and was the complex's flagship. One observer said that the Ellis Island Hospital dealt with every sort of disorder, ranging from slight injury to obscure tropical disease. It's at once a maternity home and an insane asylum. The hospital could be an overwhelming place. The language, the food, the customs, and even the care were strange to many of the immigrant patients. 350 babies were born in the hospital. Many of these instant citizens were named after the doctors and nurses who delivered them. 3,500 immigrants died in the Ellis Island Hospital. For most of the others, the hospital marked the beginning of their new life in a new country. The immigrants to Ellis Island brought their hopes, but many also carried dangerous diseases. In the era before antibiotics, contagious diseases like cholera, diphtheria, typhus, tuberculosis, and polio could be fatal. In 1907, panic and death spread through the boroughs of New York City when Mary Mallon, an immigrant kitchen worker, infected dozens of people.
During the 19th century, there were 3 major cholera pandemics that did cross the Atlantic Ocean and spread like wildfire in the United States. There was a lot of experience with these epidemics, and because there were no treatments and they didn't even understand at the time what caused cholera, a lot of people died.
Americans, on the one hand, wanted immigrants to come. On the other hand, when they came, and they came in droves, Americans were very concerned and very, very ambivalent in their feelings toward these newcomers.
The medical inspection was directed at the immigrants who traveled second or third class. The wealthier first-class passengers received little more than a glance from public health physicians. For these immigrants, citizenship was nearly automatic. For the others, the medical inspection stood between them and a life in America.
I think, frankly, the worst memory I have of Ellis Island was the physical. The doctors were seated at a long table with a basin full of potassium chloride. You had to stand in front of them, and you had to reveal yourself. They gave you what we used to, in the Army, they call short arm inspection, right there in front of everyone.
And we went to this big, like an open room, and there were a couple of doctors there, and then they tell you to strip. And my mother had never, ever undressed in front of us. You know, in those days, nobody ever would.
came up stolidly, steadily, submissively, like so many cattle. The first thing they see, explained the official, is the American flag as it hangs below us here, and all hats must come off before it. Broughton Brandenburg, author. Every immigrant who came to Ellis Island had to climb the large staircase that led to the Great Hall. At the top of the staircase stood uniformed public health service doctors who watched intently for signs of heart trouble, breathing difficulty, any kind of disability. It was the first test of the immigrants' fitness to become the laborers America was seeking.
They would then be interrogated by members of the U.S. Immigration Bureau, and they would be asked by these officers, why are you coming to the United States? How do you intend to support yourself? Where are you going? They might be asked about their political beliefs, whether or not they were anarchists, and so on. But all of this took a few hours. It could take more if there were several.
First rule of learning Spanish: don't study it, use it. You just need to speak with a native. How? With Learna AI. Let's start.
That had come in at one time.
As many as 6,000 immigrants a day were herded past the dozen doctors working the line. The doctors had less than 30 seconds to judge whether an immigrant required a more thorough medical exam. 1 in 5 immigrants received a chalk mark indicating a suspected condition. That mark could mean separation from family, an involuntary stay at the hospital, and even deportation.
Ours would be the painful duty of singling out one of the children and of saying, she has trachoma. She cannot enter. The mother and the rest of the children would have to return to Europe with the diseased one. And until the boat sailed, the father, wretched and unhappy, would haunt the detention quarters while his family kept up a constant wailing and crying. Dr. Victor Heiser, United States Public Health Service.
In order to bring a family over, the father made arrangements with various banks and so on, and bought a passage at a great sacrifice, because these fathers who were here lived on practically nothing but a herring and a piece of bread. And they worked very hard in sweatshops and brought their family over. Now, some of them had 5 to 7 children. Well, they had to pay for every child.
For most, it was momentarily traumatic, but they passed through rather quickly. But for those who were held for medical reasons, the ordeal was just beginning.
The doctors on Ellis Island had conflicting duties. As physicians, they had taken an oath to heal the sick. As public health service officers, they had the job of gatekeeper, deciding which immigrants were healthy enough to become productive citizens.
Public health doctors have a broader tableau because they're protecting the public's health as well. But there was something worked into the system, because if you were sick, they then treated you, which was remarkable. If you were terribly ill, or not even that terribly ill, it didn't just end at the inspection and you were told to go home. You were cared for, sometimes cured, and sometimes stabilized until you could go home.
In 1902, the year that the hospital opened, President Theodore Roosevelt chose a man much like himself to serve as Ellis Island's Commissioner of Immigration. William Williams was an Ivy League educated patrician who had served with Roosevelt in the Spanish-American War. In accepting Roosevelt's offer, he also accepted an 80% cut in the salary he had been making as a Wall Street lawyer. During the day, from his office window overlooking the landing dock, William Williams watched as thousands of immigrants took their first steps in America. At night, He retired to the private world of the University Club, his residence on New York's Fifth Avenue. There, he assembled a scrapbook filled with photographs, writings, and press clippings of his tenure at Ellis Island.
A millionaire bachelor, he spends his evenings in the luxury of the University Club. His days, even his Sundays, he spends over at Ellis Island, with all of its squalor, its filth, its sorrow. Newspaper clipping.
When Williams returned in 1909 to 1912 for a second term as Ellis Island Commissioner, he sought to restrict immigration. However, in his first term from 1902 to 1905, when the demand for immigrant labor was high, Williams presided over the construction of one of the world's largest public health hospitals. In his first memo as commissioner, Williams issued a strict command that set the standard for his administration.
Immigrants shall be treated with kindness and consideration by everyone at Ellis Island. Neither harsh language nor rough handling will be tolerated. William Williams.
As Williams was settling in as Commissioner of Immigration, the public health movement was gaining strength in New York City. The movement was driven by two concerns: immigrants and disease. Tens of thousands of the newcomers had settled in neighborhoods that were beginning to resemble the slums of Europe, straining public services.
You have to think about the nature of public health in the United States. In some aspects, the purpose of public health was to intrude upon people and to limit their activities for the sake of the common good. So that meant reporting diseases to public health service officers, inspecting immigrants, turning them back if they were not suitable.
But what is a very common theme, it doesn't matter if it's Russian Jewish immigrants or Chinese immigrants or African immigrants, that perception of immigrant as diseased, that's a very unhealthy combination.
And to me, it was like the House of Babel, because there were so many languages and so many people and everybody huddled together, and it was so full of fear. It was pathetic, because the ones that were being held there could be deported. And so we lived in the constant fear that they could be deported.
In the heart of Formentera, where the sea and nature offer the perfect setting for relax.
The United States did not intend to be the hospital of the nations of the earth. It did not intend to be burdened by these newcomers